17th Amendment in 1913, did the state legislatures who were elected, why did they vote to select the U.S. senator that's now popularly elected? Why do we even have states or jurisdictions? The truth is the 9th and 10th Amendment state very, very clearly that it is key to have the states, and that they should really, at the end of the day, have more power than the federal government and have a right to even pull out of the federal government if the federal government becomes destructive of their rights and liberties and freedoms, and the same for the people. The 9th Amendment states that, as you know. But we have this idea now of just saying, hey, and you wrote an article about this week that we linked to at INFOWARS.com. We're hearing more and more, even Republicans come out and say, no, that was decided in the Civil War. The federal government's all powerful. Well, okay, really? Then I guess, Obama is a dictator then. I guess, why do we even have states? Break that down for us.
Yeah, there's a mentality that has been very prevalent throughout the United States where it doesn't matter which political party you're in, Republican, Democrat, or whatever. Within the legal community, I can tell you, since I am in the legal community in the Bar Association here in Montana, that there is this prevailing idea that, and you're taught this in law school, that federal laws trump state laws, and there's no qualification to that statement. If the federal law asks the state law, whatever it might be, is trumped by that federal law. There is no study and no intentful purpose to really give effect to the 9th and the 10th Amendment. And you see that throughout the attorneys and judges in the country. The article that I wrote was in reference to an AG candidate in Montana who's a Republican who made some statements while he was sitting as a state senator about the Civil War and its effect on the state's rights to interpose against federal usurpation. And he actually is in the process of writing an article, which I have not seen yet. So we'll see what his detailed response is. But regardless of his particular view, that is a prevailing view of the Constitution of the United States. It's an incorrect view. If you read the Federalist Papers, as I mentioned in that article and detailed in that article, they were very explicit about the state's right and duty to interpose against federal usurpation. And if we look at that the bill that Obama signed on New Year's Eve, this is reason why the state should be paying attention for such reasons as the indefinite detention of U.S. citizens.
Well, I mean, look at New Hampshire's right to revolt. It's right there that anytime the state wants to pull out, it can. Texas is the Lone Star state because it opted in by treaty and can pull out anytime it wants. And it's the only state that entered that way. I know out west, the feds were more powerful then, so some of the ways that those territories were brought in, have a little bit less states' rights. But once you have your states that have rights, those trump those in precedent and travel over to the western states, which in some areas, as you know, are over 85% federal land, and they act like, federal gods harassing the people out there that are few and far between. But this outrageous idea that Obama can launch a war in Libya and not even consult Congress now. We're seeing an overall war against the Bill of Rights and Constitution and Declaration of Independence, and we see Newsweek saying, get rid of the Constitution, it caused the problems. That's counting on the public's ignorance. That's why it's important we're here stating the facts. We got rid of the Constitution, and that was like the oxygen in the room. All of our prosperity went with it. It's not the Constitution that went wrong. We went wrong by letting tyrants come in and get rid of it. I mean, it's so simple what the 9th and 10th Amendments say. It's so simple if you read the Federalist Papers and how the states made up the federal government. It's a creature of them, and the states are a creature of the people. It goes people, states, federal government. But first they said they were co-equal, just like the branches of government, and then now they say, oh, the president's the boss of everything. I mean, it's just completely backwards.
And that's why we're seeing such a resistance throughout the United States, Alex, is because taught to us over and over and over again. And then when people start to study and actually look into the truth of the matter, they say, no, that's not right. That's not true. And then so education becomes a crucial point of understanding and actually getting things changed. It's funny because when you mention, the makeup of the union and how the states enter the union and that kind of thing. If you look at even Abraham Lincoln's statements regarding secession, he never denied that secession was a right. He only said that it had to be done through the consent of the states through the Union. And so at the very least, Article 5 of the Constitution would provide the states with a method of seceding from the Union. So what we had today is even a distortion of what happened in the 1860s, which was never about the right of revolution or the right of secession in general. It was only about the way that the states seceded specifically during that time, who are holding this view that the Civil War passed to the civil government all of this authority without consent, without constitutional amendment, without due process or anything along those lines. They're stating a very serious flaw, but unfortunately, so many federal politicians have adopted that view, and they treat the states and the individuals accordingly.
Yeah, they act like they're lords, they're King George III, and we're the little serfs. But expanding on that, look, I've read what Lincoln said. I've studied the Civil War. It's not hard to find this information out. It's not like it's some secret. It's just it's not taught by the so-called mainstream deceptive media. But it had nothing to do with slavery. It was about who would control Western expansion. It was about unfair tariffs on the South that didn't affect the North. And the Lincoln quotes, you can type them into a search engine, Lincoln, I would unify the country without freeing one slave. There was very few slaves owned in the South. The institution was being phased out. That is a modern fiction to sell this. Lincoln had hundreds of newspaper owners and editors arrested, members of Congress arrested, total end of free speech, the dictatorship of Lincoln and Stanton. Then for 8-9 years after the Civil War, people were murdered and raped and robbed all over the country, even in the West, had nothing to do with slavery, by federal troops. And the carpetbagger trains behind them. This was just another great example of pointless tyranny. And now they teach this fable today that the Civil War was about freeing black people.
Yeah, and of course there's cultural context to the slavery issue in that day, and as you noted, it was on its way out for sure. The technology that was developing at that time was allowing much more production without the use of individuals to do that. So, absolutely, it was on its way out. It was a political issue. It was a matter of control over territories and the states believing that the federal government was not exercising its power for the general welfare. And so all that's a matter of history. Even Abraham Lincoln in his first inaugural address stated the issue pretty clearly. Politicians have adopted this idea that the federal laws trump state laws without regard to the 10th Amendment. It's being able to retain sovereignty over the matters they were supposed to retain sovereignty over. So we've seen over the past 100 years this gradual overtake of state sovereignty to the point now where the U.S. Supreme Court, particularly through Clarence Thomas, questioned this idea of the Commerce Clause and Congress's ability to regulate the states within their borders where their activity does not affect other states. And so they're questioning this long line of FDR stacked the courts during his administration. There is a shift. There is a shift of ideology that we're seeing take place. And it's through this natural evolutionary process of being able to retain individual liberty for our own self-preservation and self-improvement.
Well, sure, but just to be clear, it's bad enough to have a tyrannical federal government, but the people that run the federal government today, it's even worse. They're bought and paid for by globalists, by the very mega banks that have created all these global derivatives, and our military is simply there to backstop all that fraudulent paper and to collect off of us debts that are not owed by us. They're telling us we've got to raise taxes and cut benefits and all this stuff because we owe $15 trillion. And I don't agree with the dependency and the $15 trillion, but it's nothing compared to the 664 million, the Washington Post says, of the global 1.5 quadrillion, 600 plus trillion that we've been signed on to, that Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citibank created in the last 15 years or so, and they've gotten the politicians to sign us on, and now the bought and paid for mouthpieces in the media are telling the public, you owe this money, And the Federal Reserve and the central bankers, they're trying to fix it. They're telling Europeans, we're going to jack your taxes up to pay your debt. And 90+% of the debt isn't theirs. I mean, it's just such a giant fraud. So we've got to totally discredit this federal government, because it's worse than a federal government. It is a occupational command base.
That's why Ron Paul's so dangerous to their structure, to their platform, to their underpinnings of their system. Ron Paul they've done a good job over the years of trying to, but they're not able to do that much anymore because of the big following that he has, and just the sense that he makes and the historical knowledge he has regarding all of those things that you just described. And that's another reason why, on the state level, we have to have governors in place who are willing to sign into law state bank ordinances that would allow the people of the individual states to become independent of this Federal Reserve monstrosity, where Congress and those who control them are controlling the money as they have been, and getting us into debt as they have been, and diminishing our asset value and the depreciation of the dollar itself, to the point now where we're looking around and we're wondering, where's the future? We can't see it, and so we're having to go back to our defensible positions.
Well, Tim Baldwin, great job. We're going to have to do a part 2 of the interview with you in the next few weeks, getting into your book, Romans 13, that exposes how the system is using the preachers to tell people to submit to corrupt government, when obviously that's not in the Bible. One of the biggest problems we've got is that the churches have been taught to basically bow to tyranny, and you've done a great job along with your father doing that. And also look forward to getting your dad on about his run there in Montana. And where's the best place for people to find the Romans 13 book?
Yeah, Alex, they can go to Romans13truth.com. That's Romans 13, the number, truth.com, and they can order that from that website.
That's wonderful. We'll have to do a whole interview just on that coming up in the near future. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Alex.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for this edition of InfoWars Nightly News. Tomorrow, we'll be back with Bev Harris, expert on election fraud, if there was any dirty tricks or chicanery going on. And we've got also some other big guests joining us on the Nightly News tomorrow as well. She'll be joining me on the radio show. So we're going to continue to watch what's happening in the caucuses. And Drudge throughout the day has been having his own caucus votes, and Ron Paul is the clear leader there. Don't forget, if you believe in this type of information, want to help support it, it is you, the subscribers to PrisonPlanet.tv and InfoWarsNews.com, that finance this nightly news. That is seen by you first on the website and then posted on the web, where millions are able to see it each week. And so we appreciate those of you supporting us. If you're a new viewer out there and want to see all of my films and the daily TV show, radio show archived and expanded extras, we've had PrisonPlanet.tv now for close to 9 years, and you can sign up for free. We're a 15-day free trial at PrisonPlanet.tv. That's it for this edition of InfoWars Nightly News. Great job with the crew, and we'll see you back here tomorrow night.